Thank you very much for coming and joining us today. My name is Oscar Rodriguez Espíndola, and I'm part of the Aston Crisis Management Center. And today we are pleased to have a very interesting talk. A talk that is both about learning more about what is being done out there, but also about thinking how the potential of some of the expertise we have in the university can be useful moving forward with some of these areas. So today we have Kit Harrison Broninsky talking to us. He is a very reputable person. He has been, well, he has written very relevant books, and he has won different awards from the Gardner for Social Enterprise and from the NHS for Technology to replicate healthcare innovations. Usually, he is looking at, well, there are a lot of different aspects in this interaction when we're talking about crisis, and he is going to touch upon the part about technology today. We know that technology is a huge part. AI came breaking the door on different areas, right? So Kit has experience delivering major transformation programs for UK government based on groundbreaking use of AI for business intelligence. So we want to get to know a little bit more about that expertise and see how it can be, it can be joined with expertise that we have at Aston in general. So he is going to talk today about dedoctive. That is a technology they have been working on, and basically the basis for something that hopefully will be a very exciting project moving forward. So, Keith, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Oscar. Yes, so as Oscar said, this talk is really an effort to share what we're in the middle of, which has got a number of interesting angles in the hope that it might have relevance to your own research, that you might find it useful, that you may perhaps wish to get involved. So I'm going to talk about a number of different things. I'm not going to spend very long on each of those things. I'm going to aim to finish by past or even earlier. And you've got the slides, you've got links to find out more about the different things I'll say. And of course, in the discussion, we can talk more about anything you'd like to ask about. So here's the plan for the talk. And what I'm going to do is start by explaining how I came to be working in crisis management. It might be worth it. Someone's got an announcement or something in the background, perhaps going on mute. So I'm going to start by explaining how I came to be working in crisis management. Then I'll say a little bit about the technology, as Oscar mentioned, that we're employing, the work we're doing using that technology, where we think we'd like to go with that. And there are two possible research directions by Horizon Europe and ITEA. There's also an underpinning change we need to make in order to facilitate those. And then I'll talk about what I'm thinking of as a new form of technology product, Crisis Navigator, which brings together a number of different aspects of crisis management. And I expect there's many aspects I haven't yet thought about that people here might be able to discuss. Okay, so first let's start with the background. So for me, this is part of a very long journey going back to the late 1980s, which has led me, as Oscar mentioned, to write a number of books. My first book in 2005 was about collaborating across organizational boundaries. And that eventually led to my most recent book in 2021, which was called Super Communities. And that journey from collaboration to community was via work with the NHS on community-driven wellness. So it started, as I said, for the 80s, 90s into the noughties, working on collaboration. I then spent a lot of time talking about the principles in the book Human Interactions. That led to the work being picked up by the NHS, and we built a system for organisations to collaborate to replicate healthcare innovations. That's called NHS Gather, by helping people understand what had gone into an innovation, not just the technical innovation, but the stakeholders, shareholders, how the people had participated to make it happen, what sorts of people were needed, how they needed to interact, and we made reusable templates for those collaborative efforts. That in turn led me to understand that a lot of these innovations were successful because they had introduced an element of wraparound care, and that community-led aspect of wellness, of healthcare, led to another platform called Town Digital Hub, which is about engaging across the sectors with people providing different kinds of service, not just healthcare related, but lifestyle related and other forms of support, financial, educational, and safety, and so on, that all together are critical for allowing people in a community to become well in their lives. And that led to thinking about how some of these things could be funded, because a big problem in the areas we were working in, deprived inner cities, was sustaining those services. And that produced a model called Stake It Back, which was a very slimlined, stripped back way of investing in community services that didn't have all the baggage that comes with commercial investments, where risk is a big issue. If you're investing in a community project, you're not so concerned about the risk to your finances, you're more concerned about the outcome of the project. And eventually that led to the Super Communities book. And that drew some attention from leaders in technology like Vince Cerf, from leaders in social change like Matthew Taylor. And for me itself was a precursor to something I've been thinking of as the Internet of Communities. This infographic, which I actually produced after writing the book, shows how there are different things that a community needs to put in place in order to become what I think of as a super community. A super community is an ecosystem that evolves to sustain the wellness of its members, and it understands what it is, who belongs to it, what its natural, social, and industrial capitals are, how it can use them to build assets that deliver value, how it can sustain those assets, and critically, how it can reshape and restructure the use of those capitals and assets to meet emerging challenges. And the aim is to become stronger in the face of an emerging challenge than you were before it emerged. And that's the notion of anti-fragility, Taleb's notion, which originally emerged from finance, extended into socioeconomics. So that's a super community. And interestingly, the first organization to pick up my super communities principles and to deploy them at scale and pilot them successfully was not what I expected. It was the Ministry of Defence. We built a safety critical, large, complex engineering system. But we built a super community of the stakeholders, including many suppliers of different sizes and others, in creating that system. And although that was about the last area I had expected these ideas to be picked up initially, it was actually very successful and allowed us to demonstrate and prove the ideas. So after that work concluded, I started thinking about how the ideas could be enabled with technology, and that led me to the notion of the Internet of Communities. The Internet of Communities is a collection of data and apps. So the idea being that the community in question, which could be geographical, or it could be a community of interest, or a community that's challenged in some way, such as by disability or by migration, or held together by language or culture. It doesn't have to be any specific location or any preset notion. Communities can evolve all over the place. But they all have this, I think, common imperative to understand who they are, to recognize that that can be enshrined in data, and to own that data in the sense of being able to steward it, manage it, control who has access to it. And that use of data allows the community then to understand what its capitals are, to use them to build assets, and to use those assets to increase wellness. So I had the notion of an internet community as being a platform for creating these data stores, for using them to build apps that improve the effectiveness of the community, that reduce gaps and overlaps in provision to its members, a form of AI for good. And out of that came the notion that organizations would participate in this in different ways by making commitments to providing data, to maintaining assets, to deploying assets. Those commitments can enable a new form of online trust, because you can allow others to view the commitments you have made to specific communities, and that says in a very real way who you are and what you do, much more convincingly and reliably and verifiably than, for example, social media or a bio on a web page. There's a basis here for creating relationships, trust-based relationships, that I don't think exists at the moment. So that's the Internet of Communities, and as it shows there, it was powered by the notion of AI for good, but it had to be a very certain kind of AI. It had to be AI that was reliable, trustworthy, verifiable, because this is important stuff. And in particular, what you don't want to do is just hand it over to a big tech company to use in its surveillance capitalism and just turn all that data into marketing. So you have to be able to trust the answers, and you have to be able to trust how the data is managed and curated and validated. So that led in turn to the notion of what has now become the software called dedoctive. Dedoctive is what people these days call neurosymbolic AI. Essentially, it's a wrapper around AI models, like the ones emerging from OpenAI and Google and all the other different platform providers now, and including open weight models. Dedoctive wraps around them, and it makes the answers that come out of them checkable, verifiable in audit, transparent, and you can see very clearly from every phrase in an answer, you have links that take you back to the specific sources of that information, even if it's background text in an image or buried in a table cell. So that's the notion of dedoctive, and I have a short video I can show you, which I hope is going to play. Let's see if it does.
Mainstream AI tools sound confident, but is this enough? Dedoctive provides the evidence and guardrails needed for decisions that can be checked, challenged, and defended. Mainstream AI is designed to give you a polished answer. Dedoctive is a neurosymbolic AI platform that focuses on the harder requirement. Can the answer survive review? In critical situations, providing assurance is as important as the answer itself. Dedoctive starts with the information your organization already trusts. It turns documents, data, tables, and images into a source-linked knowledge model. Then dedoctive works inside a governed workflow with human-in-the-loop guardrails for the business rules and review points you define. In dedoctive, provenance is fundamental. The output is not a vague AI summary. Every statement is linked to the exact source evidence, a paragraph, a table cell, or background text in an image. Response maps let you inspect the reasoning visually. Get started with dedoctive. Bring us one complex, document-heavy decision process. We will hold a short discovery call, then build a proof of concept using your documents and data. You will see for yourself how dedoctive makes decisions faster, clearer, and easier to defend. Mainstream AI tools sound confident.
Go to the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot more videos I'm not going to show you now, including explainers, which talk about the architecture, and demonstration videos, which actually show dedoctive in action. And you might be interested to watch some of those. There's all of them can be found in that YouTube channel, and there's links to specific ones as further down in this presentation. What we do with dedoctive is we make products called navigators. We call them that because we want to suggest that the humans are always in charge, and the AI tool or navigator is simply an assistant. And a number of these navigators are related to crisis management. I'm going to talk about those a bit further down in this presentation. I think there's an argument that all of these navigators are related to crisis management in some way, but the ones on the right-hand side for retrofitting homes, for transition to a green economy, for helping clinicians review decisions they've made, and for planning, I think they're less directly related, but you may feel differently, so I encourage you to have a look at the navigators. What I'm going to talk specifically now is a project we've been involved in for 18 months so far. There's another 18 months to go for the EU framework criteria. There's a UK consortium of 3 technology companies, 2 universities, Leeds and Nottingham, and the project's called Siren, and the technology companies have been building a product called RouteMate, which we aim to link up with the academic algorithms that are being produced by university partners. So Siren as a whole had very grand aims when it started, which was to enhance disaster management and humanitarian logistics in fire, flood, and earthquake scenarios. Those grand plans included a powerful AI hub, and other very seamlessly integrated technologies. When the project started, the lead partner in Turkey had their budget cut to 25% of what they'd asked for, and that meant that some of those things had to fall by the wayside. In particular, the AI hub fell by the wayside. Also, a lot of the collaboration between countries fell by the wayside. So we're essentially on our own in the UK, as they are the other countries. And what I'm going to talk about could be linked up with the other countries, but is not being done so at the moment. We started designing a solution in the face of this reduced working arrangement by looking at how incidents are communicated among emergency responders. And I imagine people in this room will know about MAIT, M-A-I-T, the new multi-agency instant transfer standard. This was produced in the last few years to deal with the fact that often when different emergency response organisations are dealing with a situation, they can't even communicate effectively where it is, what it is. And so that results in vehicles going to the wrong places, often not knowing where to go at all, and not really having the same understanding of what's going on. So we call our tool Route Mate because it takes as input a mate incident along with supplementary information such as the types of response vehicles that are available, where they're based at the moment, where you would like to send them to. And it produces the information needed for effective routing. So this is an outline of the workflow that underpins Route Mate. The orchestration tool is dedoctive. This is a workflow in dedoctive. And what is happening in this workflow, and we're using West Yorkshire Fire Service as our illustrative example because they faced an almost a perfect storm of the kind of crisis we want to help support in 2015 with the big floods in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire. So they're very keen to avoid that happening again. So we're using that flooding of the River Calder as a use case. In this workflow, it starts with such a flood. The user of the workflow inputs details of where the flood has taken place, what vehicles they've got to respond. Then there's an agentic work stream here shown underneath where dedoctive will investigate that requirement, see if the information is sufficient to move forward. If not, it gets more. It'll obtain some flood information from the Environment Agency. Then it'll create an initial GIS display of the polygon of the area that's it believes to be of concern. It checks that with the user. If the user says, yes, that's the area I'm interested in, it then goes on and it invokes a simulation of the flood levels on the routes in that area now, in an hour, in 2 hours, in 6 hours, in 12 hours. And it passes that into a routing tool called USmart, which then gives the user a link to a screen they can use to request a route from the response vehicle, a response vehicle, many response vehicles at a point in time in the future. So I want to send this ambulance from this place to a central location in Hebden Bridge in 2 hours from now, or whatever. And it gives them a route which is aware of the flood disruption. So that's Route Mate, and we're intending to join that up with the algorithms, the resource allocation algorithms our partners at Leeds and Nottingham are creating, so that the outputs of their algorithms, which are effectively routing requests, to move supplies around, or perhaps to clear debris, perhaps to move casualties, they are input into the Route Mate tool. We are well aware that this is a very limited point solution. We want to do two things next. First, we want to scale it to make sure this can be deployed anywhere, and also to add what-if functionality to be able to predict and prepare for just such situations in future. So we're looking at applying to the Horizon call shown here, which is all about scaling proven and disaster risk solutions, DRS. By the time this starts, we will have deployed in West Yorkshire. We will also have undergone an evaluated pilot and possibly already published the outcome of that pilot. Our academic partners will publish papers on it. So we're in a good position to undergo that scaling work. And one of the things we need to do to scale is we need to look at the simulation architecture, because at the moment we're using a simulation tool. I think we need to switch to a simulation platform. I'll say more about that in a moment. The other area we want to move this forward is in the more an R&D relationship. We want to look at how we can extend this to provide a more holistic crisis management solution. And we've already started into Dedoctive, my company, building out workflows that could help predict and mitigate risks to supply chains, which are, of course, dependent on blockages to routes and disruption to routes, but also to many other things, such as the ability to move things in and out of a conflict zone, the availability of certain supplies, the willingness of organizations to provide certain supplies to certain organizations, handling cash, these kind of things. So we're looking at a follow-on project for ITEA for that, which probably wouldn't start till Jan 28. And many of the partners that are in the current ITEA project will be interested to be involved in that. We're also looking to expand it quite widely. And as I say, this is much more about the bigger picture of supply chain risk, supply chain prediction, management, mitigation, than it is just about routing, as we're focusing on at the moment. So I'd encourage those of you who might have an interest in that to get involved, to have a look at the project proposal and talk to us. As I said, we need to open up RouteMate because at the moment we have a simulation tool, which is essentially a handcrafted way of providing flood levels in areas across the UK. And if we're going to simulate more than that, more than disruptions to routes, we need to look at what's more like a simulation platform. So I'm thinking about whether it would be possible to have some kind of curated but open simulation library in which you could say have Python simulations or simulations written in other scripting languages or the common tool formats that could be accessed as needed, that could be produced at scale by academics and by others, submitted for review, and then once reviewed, made available to crisis responders across the world. And you can imagine that, for example, universities in Turkey would have an interest in modelling earthquakes, and universities of Spain would have an interest in modelling wildfires, and so on. In UK, floods, perhaps. So I don't quite know how opening that simulation architecture would work. I think we need some support and advice on that, and that's partly what I'm hoping we might be able to discuss when I'm finished speaking. So all these things put together, for me, form a new kind of navigator that I call Crisis Navigator, and it's more than RouteMate. Shown at the top is how I'd like to extend this going forward with ITEA. We're also working with Somerset County Council on extending their the current programme that's being run by Somerset Wildlife Trust called Act to Adapt, about how communities can take ownership of adaptation efforts in their own locality. We'd like to extend that using AI, make that deliverable to other communities, not just in Somerset, to create a broader knowledge base to include results from existing efforts. So that's what we think of as Adaptation Navigator, but effectively it could be part of crisis mitigation. The two screens in the centre are examples from our Safety Navigator, one of goal structuring notation analysis of a safety argument. Essentially what this is takes a set of documents that say we have addressed the risks of a certain situation, which might be flooding in a city. And then it casks those claims that are being made about having addressed those risks into this formal notation called goal structuring notation. So it's very easy to understand. Rather than having to read 1,000 pages, you can look at a simple diagram, and you can click into the notes to see where there might be issues with that argument. Perhaps the evidence is outdated or missing, or perhaps the assumptions should really be not assumptions, but should be treated as claims and validated in the argument, or vice versa. That's a part of Safety Navigator. Another part of Safety Navigator is the production of bow tie diagrams for hazard analysis. So this looks at a particular hazard, identifies the top event, looks at the moment when the hazard gets out of control, looks at the threats that could lead to that top event, the consequences of the top event, the preventions to the threats, mitigations of consequences, and the various escalation factors, and shows that in a very simple table, again clickable, and again with analysis of where the argument may be weak. So that's, I think, could form part of Crisis Navigator. And then finally, I think the Wellness Navigator we're working on, which is a combination of a citizen-facing wellness app with a clinician-facing mental health tool. So the Wellness app will have guardrails which ensure that whenever something is detected that should really be addressed by clinicians, that is called out to appropriate mental health clinicians, and they are given the support of another form of AI, a partner of ours, that does clinical case formulation makes it very fast for the clinician to get up to speed with the wellness issues. And I'm thinking this could be used in the aftermath of a crisis when a lot of people will be having post-trauma issues and perhaps disability and other things that are related to having experienced a crisis. So that's what I'm going to say. And well, it's 26 minutes in. That's about what I'd hoped. And I hope you found that interesting. And over to you for discussion and Q&A, please.
Thank you so much, Keith. It is quite interesting because I think there are a lot of things to unpack from that talk. So I will invite a few questions from the audience. Anyone wants to ask something? Lakshmi, you'll be the first one.
Yes, thank you so much, Oscar. So I'm Lakshmi Thapa, currently the final year PhD student researching on the Aston Crisis Center. So my research actually matches to the product that you are mentioning here to a very large extent. And thank you so much for this interesting presentation. For me, it's very contextual, and I could relate to lots of the things that you were mentioning in your slides. And then in terms of my questions, I'm particularly interested in terms of the large language models that you are using in terms of like evacuation routing and resource allocation, because one of the component is what I'm exploring in my research as well. And then in that context, I wanted to ask, like what kind of multimodal data the system is considering and what will be the output, because I believe that the system is made for a crisis situation, meaning there might be the need of feeding real-time data. So is your system considering the real-time situation, and then will output be visualized in the form of map or not? Because for the routing situation, we might need to visualize which road might be the best, or which route should be taken in terms of evacuation, and then what kind of resources should be allocated where. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So I especially wanted to inquire in terms of data that you are feeding and how it updates in terms of real-time data extraction and delivering the output in the same way.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Yes, I think that's probably a number of questions bundled into one, isn't it? I'll say a little bit about how dedoctive works. So dedoctive wraps any LLM. And if the LLM is multimodal, then dedoctive can consume images and video and so on. We are currently producing outputs that are often quite visually sophisticated, graphical. And you saw in these slides an example of that with the goal structuring notation. We are not focusing on GIS outputs. We prefer to invoke tools that are dedicated GIS tools for that purpose, simply because we want to put the effort where it is most effective. So at this point in time, we are not generating GIS natively. We are feeding, say, GeoJSON data into a GIS system, which then presents it and allows users to interact with it. I think something else you mentioned was what kind of models we're using, and there's an open question which we're discussing with some of our partners, particularly around Wellness Navigator, where we're talking to another group at Leeds University about this, about the degree to which the effectiveness of a dedoctive navigator depends on the training of the LLM. So far, we haven't found that necessary. We've been able to bound the reasoning enough and in sophisticated enough ways that we haven't needed to train an LLM specifically. There's a question about whether that might be useful, about whether it might allow us to use, for example, smaller models, which are less compute heavy, take less time to answer, cost less in terms of energy. And that's an resolved question yet. I suspect the answer is a bit of both. And we'll arrive at that naturally over time. So that's a bit of a collection of answers to a collection of questions, Lakshmi. Does that give you some of the information you're looking for?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I can extract some information. Just one last question, maybe before passing to others. So, following my questions previously, if I correct me if I miss it. So you are not considering real-time scenarios for now, but it's based on data already collected and then predicting based upon that. Is it?
Thank you. I did miss that point that you made. We have in the past been working with the National Physical Laboratory on real-time data, and we're interested to pursue that work. We applied for funding from Innovate UK in partnership with NPL to do work in particular high-risk engineering situations like power plants, nuclear power plants, and so on, where there's a vast amount of data streaming through the whole time, and it was important to be able to identify what operators should be focusing on. So we were hoping to identify, with the support of NPL, a framework that would allow us to identify triggers and alarms that we could then respond to in Dedoctive to filter the millions of data points every second down to a manageable number, so the Dedoctive could then run them through one of our bow tie diagrams, for example, to identify whether an assumption had been violated or whether a top event was emerging or had emerged. So we do have that ambition. Innovate UK decided that our ambition was too broad for the funds they were able to make available, so we kind of had to backpedal, and we're now looking at other ways to take this forward. And that work could form part of Crisis Navigator. It's not currently blended into my thinking, but it easily could be, and perhaps it should be.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Martin?
Hi, Keith. Thank you for your presentation. It's, I have to say, excellent. I have to make a slight confession to start out with. I'm a bit of an interloper. I'm nothing to do with crisis management, so to speak, but I was very much interested. I'm indirectly involved in it, in the agentic side of stuff. So I guess my first question is, so just so I'm clear, you're a commercial operation rather than academic operational, but obviously you've got strong links with academia. Is that right? My second question is, how do we kind of start some conversations with you about potentially working with you? And the third bit, just in sort of sense of transparency as to why I'm here. We're currently, I've just completed a research pilot program on behalf of Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and they're looking at how to support small businesses in reducing their energy consumption. Given that we're all basically sat here in the middle of the UK sweltering under 33-degree heat, I don't think that work can come quickly enough. So I'm kind of crisis adjacent, let's call it that. And so what we've done is undertaken a substantial number of energy audits over the last sort of 2 years. There's about 3,500 of them. Each involves demographic information about the business, some attitudinal data in terms of how they feel about energy management. There's all of the data in relation to the recommendations that were made, and then there's base level energy data in terms of what was the energy consumption of the business in the previous 12 months, for example, which we would use as a benchmark to make predictions on possible energy savings. So in line with some of what you discussed, I can't remember which, forgive me, in some of your previous slides, there is basically a large complex data set that involves straightforward sort of maths and numbers, narrative, photographs, graphs, kind of you name it, sort of sat there. And we're in the process of basically turning that lot into an LLM model that we can use to basically enable more businesses at scale to be able to access an energy reduction report or some energy reduction knowledge. At the moment, there simply isn't enough energy assessors on the planet to be able to cope with what's required for the UK, given that we've got 5.5 million SMEs just in the UK alone. If I'm hearing you right, the kind of thing that you're talking about with your software as a wrapper, that's something that may fit in with that, possibly. And I'd also like to have a separate conversation with you on your indirect benefits, because with the way the world's moving, from something like, I think it's about April 2027, if you want to be or remain a supplier with the NHS from then onwards, you basically have to be able to produce an energy reduction plan. And in line with the stuff that you're talking about, that has to be credible and transparent. So it's got to be published on the business's websites in order to basically kind of qualify as part of that criteria and to develop that sense of trust within all of this. Given that, as far as I understand it, and you probably know much more about this than me, the NHS has something like about 80,000 suppliers. Not all of them are constantly active. That's an awful lot of businesses that really don't know an awful lot about how to reduce their energy, or having to produce an energy resilience or energy reduction plan in a very short period of time. So quite how the NHS itself is going to manage that, I don't know as yet. And certainly from the end user, the small business perspective, in terms of trying to either get onto or remain on current supply chains, that also presents quite a challenge at scale. So I think there is possibly an opportunity in that indirect space, as you've described it in one of your slides. So is what I'm talking about, I know it's all a bit high level, the kind of thing that could fit in with what you've been developing? And if so, how do we have some conversations?
Well, thank you, Austin. Okay, so I'll try and answer your questions in turn. Yes, we're a commercial organisation. We're a social enterprise. We are just emerging from the R&D stage of our operations.
Okay.
I would say. Well, I say emerging. Reality, I doubt we'll ever emerge, because if anything, R&D is ramping up. It's just that after 2 years, through nearly 3 years, we've got a product that's now ready. So we can start offering a deployable product now. And as to how to work with us, there's a number of things, and we'll come on to some of them in a moment when talking about your point about energy. Our standard thing that we say to organizations is, let's do what we call a micro pilot, which is bring us a challenging problem you've got. Bring us, we say often, it's a document heavy decision process, something that is currently very cumbersome, doesn't work the way you might like it to. You don't have the human resources you would wish to deploy it. Even if you did, it would take too long. And we'll show how we can use this new form of neurosymbolic AI that we call dedoctive to address that problem in a really different way, and give you a form of answer you probably never thought you could have, that's got the human in the loop guardrails needed for you to be able to trust and rely on the solution, make it defensible and auditable. So that's our standard route in. But in reality, a lot of the organisations we're working with are much more like partners than they are like customers. At this stage, they nearly all are, because we're, as I said, we're just emerging from R&D. So we haven't had customers, not on a large scale yet. We've had grant funders, and we've had academic partners and other forms of partner, such as the clinical and mental health solution I mentioned before. So we're very flexible. We're at that perfect stage to engage with, in which we're ready for anything, and we're not too constrained. So I think that's an opportunity for your organisation. Then you made a number of really interesting points about energy. I was trying to post a link into the chat, but I don't have the ability to write into the chat. I think because I don't belong to Aston's organisation, Oscar. I don't know if you can enable that, but if you go to dedoctive.ai/Keith, Keith, my name.
Okay. Yeah.
Then you'll see that's my blog page, and a blog about 4 or 5 blogs ago is called "Trust is a Sustainability Issue," and the point. That's actually the 5th in a series of blogs about energy reduction, in particular in relation to AI. And the series makes a number of points, but it concludes by looking at how a lot of the energy we waste is because we're approaching AI very poorly overall as a society. We are not seeking to make a tool that we can use in a focused, efficient way to give answers we can rely on. We're using it in this kind of chaotic, broad brush, clumsy way, which means that in order to get any value out of the answers we're given, we have to spend an awful amount of time checking them and trying to verify them, which is very inefficient. We're often typically using much more powerful models than we need to do this. And then we're wasting massive human time. So as you say, we're sitting here sweltering in 33 degrees heat doing things we shouldn't need to do. So a lot of the answer, I think, to making business more efficient is to recognize that AI can be an immensely powerful tool, but you do need to adopt approach, something like the one we're promoting, in order to get any benefit out of it. Otherwise, it's a huge disbenefit. And in fact, we're starting to see, and you people in this room may be well aware of this, that coding, for example, software coding, where people thought it would transform the world, all programs being redundant. In fact, software coding via AI is enormously expensive at the moment. It costs thousands of dollars to do what a human programmer could probably do much more cheaply. And even then, those thousands of dollars are 10% of the true cost, because the platform providers are bearing the true cost. The AI economy is completely topsy-turvy right now. People are saying, as I'm sure you've all been reading in the press, how initial efforts to get ROI from AI are mostly failing. So there's a couple of companies that have succeeded, like Walmart, big companies who know how to do process management at enterprise level, and they've managed to get some returns. But most companies are completely failing. And that's because people don't know what to do with this thing. They don't. They're just sort of scattering it about over the place in a very untargeted way. So what we're trying to do with our navigators, and a lot of our navigators are about energy. So we've got an adaptation navigator. We've got a green economy navigator for helping people transition into the green roles. Britain, as you will know, needs 1 million more people in green jobs by 2030. And in the meantime, people are being thrown out of their jobs, right, left, and centre for all different reasons. But we're not seeing that transition that we should be seeing. So we've got a green skills navigator. We've got a retrofit navigator for making homes more sustainable. And underpinning all this are ideas about how we can deal better with crises and deal better with AI generally to reduce all this wastage that we have all the time in society. So I'd be very keen to talk to you, Martin, and see how we can put some of that together into a practical way forward. And I've had a little interaction with DESNZ in the past. I've been to DESNZ to talk to a couple of your senior policy advisors, so we could catch up about that afterwards. I can't put my email into the chat because I can't access the chat. But if you go to
that's okay. I've got your blog page, and I presume you're on LinkedIn as well. So I'll if nothing else, I've got hello@collaboration-tools.com. So I can presume I can kind of contact you there. Just quickly, sorry, Maria, because it hands up, the other areas that you've just sort of triggered in my head was, and you've just related to, is which we would be doing in some levels, providing advice or recommendations, then the transparency of where that has come from, I think is absolutely critical in order to be able to gain any sense of credibility. The other area is, which is more, I think, in your kind of crisis management wheelhouse side of stuff, is if we can basically support a very large number of businesses to reduce their energy consumption, then that has an impact at a national level, sort of say in terms of infrastructure for, say, like National Grid. And obviously they work with numerous local authorities, and we're talking to some of them ourselves in terms of the quality of the data that they've got and they're using to make those projections. And so actually being able to potentially layer something like this as at various 5%, 10%, 15, 20% kind of energy reduction across these cohorts of businesses. These are the geographies that they're typically kind of located in. So these potentially would be, these are the times of year when their energy use is at a peak. So these are the potential impacts in terms of energy distribution within the grid, which potentially, if it can be modeled nicely, could actually make some quite substantial differences. So that's, sorry, I'm really excited about this. I'll shut up, otherwise I'll just keep talking away forever. So, but anyway, thank you so much for your. I'll be in touch. So my apologies,
Thank you,
Maria.
Martin.
Sorry. Thank you,
Maria.
Yes, thank you for a very nice talk. I'm a computer scientist working in AI and in simulation. I wanted to hear a bit more about the simulations that you use, the type of simulations they are, what are they based on, and also whether you use the agentic side as a harness for them or something else.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, it's a great question. I would like to use the agentic side as a harness for them. At the moment, we're just orchestrating access to outputs from simulation tool, which I don't think is really quite what you're saying and what we want to do ultimately. And what we need to do to make Crisis Navigator more than just a routing tool, to make it a supply chain risk management tool, we need to be able to configure the simulations very precisely and do different kinds of simulations for different purposes, different areas at different times. So I don't know what kind of platforms, technologies, but there exist for that, because I'm not a simulation expert. I've done a little bit of discrete event simulation, and I know a bit about system dynamics, but that's about the limit of it, really. At the moment, we're using a tool from a partner in our Siren project called Urban Hawk. They have their own product called Polar One, which is written in C++, and into which they have just loaded a whole load of data points for flooding in the UK. So we have access to what we need for now for doing our minimum viable product of RouteMate, and to deploying it in West Yorkshire Fire Service to look at how we might manage flooding situations going forward. To scale it to multiple regions, I think we need to go beyond that. As I say, I'm not totally sure how, because it's not my area, simulation, but I feel that we need to, as you say, harness the simulations more. Certainly to extend it beyond routing, we need to a lot more. If I'd be interested to see what you have to say, Maria, you know a lot more about simulations than I do.
Well, I work in agent-based simulation, but it's not the only way. As you know, I would be interested to hear how you're doing it. But yeah, so I work in agent-based simulation for traffic, for supply chains, and we use optimization within the simulation and also as a harness for the simulation with agentic AI on top of it. A lot of my work is in traffic, infrastructure for smart cities and so on, but we've done supply chains as well. So yeah, but I just want to know what's in this space. It's a fairly new space, putting agentic next to AI. I'm happy to talk more some stage if that's what it is.
That would be good. I mean, what I imagine, and this is just me imagining where it should be possible to do this, is that one should be able to create a curated collection of existing simulations that use a certain scripting language, say, or a certain technique, like discrete event simulation, to look at how the flow of goods for a port might be affected in a time of crisis, just to give an example. And then, say you've got some simulations of that kind, you should then be able to agentically ask a large language model to say, can you make me a new one now? I want it for, it's not for a port this time, it's for an airport. And it's for a different kind of supplies and in a different kind of crisis. And it feels to me like it should then be possible for that LLM to give you the basis for simulation, probably also possible for the LLM to then have a look at it, see how well it's done, to check it. This is what thinking models do. They just continually check their answers over and over again to try and improve them. And so in that way, one ought to be able to create an evolving library of simulations, and you'd want humans in the loop, I think, to validate those before you just deployed them and people started using them to manage real situations. But in that way, it feels like you should be able to accelerate the production of simulations and target them for very specific supply chain risks. That's broadly my thinking. Does that make sense to you?
It
Or you've got to mute, Maria.
Sorry, it does. We have prototypes that do this sort of thing for traffic. They run the simulation with different assumptions, different parameters. So the LLM runs the simulation, the agent-based simulation, with different assumptions and different parameters, different regimes in order to carry out what-if experiments, at the same time as eliciting feedback from the human user. To find out what's realistic, what's not, and what's efficient, what's not. Creating another simulation that doesn't exist, a different setting. It depends how your simulation is built and whether it can tolerate that. But we've certainly shown how it can be used in prototype form within an existing simulation. We've also had it query and experiment with multiple different simulations at different scales. This can also work well.
Thank you. Yes, well, it would be good to discuss further after this meeting.
Thank you so much, Maria. Any other final questions, guys? No, well, in that case, I just wanted to ask something, Keith. I noticed that there's a lot of room for growth in the application that you were discussing. One of them that caught my eye was that you were talking about resource allocation, right?
Yes.
And I remember that you were working with the fire service. Now, when you talk about resource allocation, are we talking just about materials and the supply chain side, or are you considering human resources and the organizational side? Or are you considering both potentially for the future?
Both, and I should say that this is really the basis of work in our partners at the University of Leeds and Nottingham. Hussein, and you will know about this because it's through Hussein that I came across your centre. And we met at a workshop in Leeds organised by the Centre for Analytics, Operations and Technology there, which is leading on this. So they're looking at things like if you want to distribute aid to casualties after a crisis, where should you set up the depots? How should you move materials to those depots and when? Also, how do you restore, what's the best, most optimal way to restore normal activity to hospitals and other institutions in the aftermath of a crisis? How can you ramp back up most effectively? So a number of different areas. And as I say, those algorithms will produce inputs to RouteMate in that they will produce routing requests, but they produce requirements that go well beyond that, in that people also have to set up these supply depots and distribution hubs and so on. So I think it's quite important.
It is quite interesting. Now, the reason I ask is that these problems are extremely complex. So everything that you just said, for instance, it is going to have a multi-criteria aspect that goes into it. Routing algorithm, there are hundreds of them. How you build that algorithm and how it works, the same for location that you were talking about, allocation, all of that, I think there's a lot of, a lot of opportunity, but I think it would be worth, I know there's some people here that are interested also in that area, to have a discussion at some point to see what are the potential opportunities for working in the future. And I'm mindful of the time. Is there any final questions? Anything anyone wants to add? No? Perfect. So I would like to thank Keith for a very, very interesting and engaging presentation and a discussion that hopefully is going to open a lot of opportunities for further collaboration. I added in the chat some details. And sorry, Hossein, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to give a thumbs up, but instead I raised my hand. Thank you very much, Keith.
Thanks. And no, it's great talking to you all. I hope we can move forward with some of these discussions in future.
Perfect. Some of the contact details of Keith are already in the chat in case you want them, guys. Also, there's going to be the recording of this session. And with this, we conclude the seminar sessions for the Aston Crisis Management Center in this academic year. So thank you so much for coming. Sorry, Martin.
My apologies. One last thing. Will you? Is it possible to get hold of a copy of the slides?
Yes, actually, in the chat, there's a link at the top where you can look at the slides and go into the different links.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Jess. Thank you, Keith. Thanks.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oscar, may I ask, what's the what are your policies on sharing the recording of this presentation?
There's no problem. I'll send you the link so you can use it.
But thank you. That'd be very helpful, I think, to others.
Thank you so
Share
much.
it with my colleagues. Thank you all. It's really great to meet you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much.
guys. Have a very nice day.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.